if this is just my tinfoil hat, but this LeBron, Stephen A. Smith, you have the whole Luka buildup. Doesn't it seem like this is the NBA trying to hype up the season, or do you think this is an actual feud with actual venom going on? Because to me, you could make the argument that this is staged, or you can make the argument that this is two people that actually don't like each other. Like, keep my son's name out of your mouth.
I think it's real because you're going after his family. You're going after him. The fucking everyday GOAT debates between Stephen A. and First Take. Like, I feel like it's gotten to LeBron at this point. He was on Pat McAfee on Tuesday, I believe, and they go at it. He talks for about an hour and just kind of unleashes on Stephen A. Says he's been going on a Taylor Swift-like tour, bitching and moaning about what LeBron said to him during that altercation about Bronny. I don't know. I feel like I definitely think it's real. I just think that Stephen A. has definitely exacerbated it a little bit more. It's made it a lot worse than it has to be. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, for me, I think this is really fascinating because you have LeBron James going on Pat McAfee, and it seems like LeBron, like, as soon as I saw him on that set, I said, holy shit, this is an ambush. He goes up to Stephen A. Smith at the game, and then he's talking to him there. And then you go right on to Pat McAfee, and you do an hour interview, and it's just nonstop quote, nonstop quote, nonstop quote. And then you have LeBron here on Pat McAfee, and it is one of the biggest interviews, completely melts down the sports world. And I feel like this is the moment in time. And I'm not a LeBron stan. LeBron isn't my GOAT. I think the GOAT conversation is a little bit weird because it's in each era. But like for me, just like, so you know where I'm coming from, this seemed like the moment where the entire mainstream sports media cracked and kind of crumbled down, because there was a moment, remember, like 5-10 years ago, where it's like fake news, and then it seemed like podcasting was the primary form where people consume their news. Like, no one really watches like cable anymore. This seemed kind of like the death of cable sports, where you have LeBron announce a podcast with Steve Nash, go on Pat McAfee, and then diss Stephen A. Smith, who just signed $100 million deal, and now you're paying Stephen A. Smith 5 years, $100 million. It seems like his credibility in the sports world after this feud, it seems like he's taking it personal. He's bitter. And then you also have to look at the scenario. It's like, who is LeBron's biggest fan and the one waving his pom-poms every day? As Antonio Brown would say, a Shannon Sharp type of tweet for LeBron James. Like, Shannon Sharp is Stephen A. Smith's co-host on First Take, and I know he's doing his own thing, but like when you have Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp kind of as your two top guys at ESPN, and then now Stephen A. is putting Shannon in an awkward position where I work with this guy, but I also probably have a lot more respect for LeBron, and this is my favorite NBA player of all time, and I think this guy's the GOAT.
Yeah, it's a mess, honest to God. But when it comes to what he said, there's a couple of things that LeBron said that upset the sports world. One of which he called Stephen A. Basically, what he did was him just being a bitch. You have a list of all the quotes that he said, but the one that I see that's circulating around the mainstream media, after everything you talked about, how it felt like kind of a shift, the biggest thing they took away from it was Giannis could score 250 in the 70s. And of all the things that LeBron said, first of all, I watched this whole hour-long podcast. It was great. I'm not a big LeBron fan historically. The GOAT debate's an interesting one. I definitely think there's an argument from him there, but maybe more longevity-wise and influence-wise, but that's a whole nother debate for another day. But I feel like this time he actually felt a lot more loose, a lot more based, and it was great to see LeBron do that. But the biggest thing that everyone took out of it, despite the fact that he said some cool shit in there, was the whole 70s era, Giannis scoring 250 points in the 70s. And of course, who would you expect to freak out the most about that? The old heads. As soon as I saw him say that, I immediately thought, where in the world is Mad Dog Russo? Because Mad Dog Russo, the same guy that defends Bob Cousy and fucking the plumbers of the 60s, of course he took a shame to that. And to me, I think the 70s era is the only era in basketball that doesn't have you know what it's known for? Cocaine. It is the nose beers era of the NBA, and they're trying to defend it. The 60s has Wilt. It's got Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain in the 60s. You have Jordan in the 80s, or Magic and Bird. The 90s have Jordan. The 2000s have Kobe and Tim Duncan. 2010s have Steph and LeBron. The 70s is known for crack. That's what it's known for. Not Gail Goodrich, not Elvin Hayes, not Dr. J. No, it's known for crack. It is the crack era of the NBA. Literally the era that was so bad that the ABA and NBA merged together to save both of the leagues. Why are we defending this? Of course, Giannis could score 300 points in that time. He is significantly better than any of the plumbers that played in that time.
And it's also like, who fucking cares? It seemed like it was said in jest and as a joke. Like, yeah, Giannis could dominate back then. Obviously, Giannis is an athletic freak. And then you have Mad Dog Russo there, like, oh, Steven, no, I watched him back then. And I tell you, Julius Irving is better than Giannis. He's not even Julius Irving. I tell you, Steven, this is blasphemy to my childhood heroes that I grew up watching. And, you know, if your heroes are formed in your mind while you are consuming lead paint and living in houses being made with lead paint, maybe the NBA you watched back then, you don't really remember it, right? When everything was being built with asbestos and lead paint, maybe it really wasn't as glorious as you remember it. Maybe you guys were all just high off of fumes because it was unregulated back then. I feel like that's the question we never have about the boomers. Like, oh yeah, it's like your great NBA back in the 70s where they couldn't dribble. Like, I like LeBron's analogy for it. It's like a car. It's like it kind of evolves over time, and you have some of your muscle cars you like to drive, but you also have like your newer sports car, and it's just a different game.
Yeah, it is a different game. It's funny that he says the Julius Irving thing. Julius Irving was 6'7", 210, okay? And he averaged about 24 points a game. Giannis, in today's time, a much better time than, you know, the Coke era, the nose beers era, the era of consuming cocaine. He's averaging 30 points a game. He's 6'11", 242. If Dr. J can score 25 points in that era, the way he was, why can Giannis not do that when he's 7 feet tall, a freak of nature, and he's playing up against people like Giannis, he's playing up against people like Joker and Wemby and LeBron and Steph? There's no way in hell. Granted, I hate these era debates anyways, but I do think the car analogy kind of makes you understand a little bit more what we're talking about here. Of course, fucking 1960s Mustang and a 2020s Mustang, which one is going to run better? The 2020s Mustang, most likely.
Yeah, and you know, basketball is a unique game where it kind of just got, if they figured it out, where you just need to attempt more threes, like 10 more 3-point attempts, 10 to 15 more 3-point attempts a game, and you're probably going to win more times than not. And the Warriors and the Celtics kind of figured it out. So with that, you kind of have the bitterness where it was harder to score back then. We weren't allowed to shoot, where it's like when we first started watching the NBA, it was still a very positional game where you'd have Russell Westbrook at point guard, then we need Thabo Cephalosha to go guard the best player and do absolutely nothing on offense, and we're going to bring James Harden off the bench because he can't play defense. It's a completely different game right now. But the thing I don't like about the old head era is, like, if they grew up in that era, they would be used to playing more physical. And if you're a physical specimen like LeBron, like, so Larry Bird can play in the 70s, way less athletic than LeBron James, but LeBron can't. Like, I feel like you would just adapt to, if you're going to give me calls and you're going to let the game be a little softer, I'm going to adapt to that. But if the game is more physical and you have to play, like, you're also going to adapt to that too. So like people saying like no one in the modern NBA could play back in the 70s, it's like, well, if they grew up back in the 70s, then they would actually like it would just be basketball. Like, it wouldn't be any different.
Yeah, it would just be a little bit more intense. And it's not like these people don't play street ball, which is more aggressive as well. I just think that argument is lazy. But he said a lot of things. It was an hour-long podcast, like we mentioned. You have a list of 25 quotes that he said, ultimately, one of which obviously was what we just went over with the Coke era.
Yeah, one of them in the Coke era, and then, yeah, I have every 5 quotes from LeBron James that he went over on Pat McAfee here. So number 1 on this list was Stephen A. Smith. He said he's going to be happy as hell. He's going to be smiling ear to ear when he hears me talking about him. He's going to be like, oh my God, grab some ice cream and sit on this chair in his tidy whities on the couch. And that's what he had to say about Stephen A. Smith. And then, you know, the craziest part about Stephen A. Smith's response that I want to touch on is he was like, you will never be talked about again by me. once you retire. Like, that's a threat. Like, okay, LeBron James just set the internet on fire, has a podcast now with Steve Nash after JJ Redick is the Lakers head coach, and now you're like, when you retire, I'll never talk about you again. Like,
Is that the punishment for talking shit to Stephen A. Smith? I feel like that's a
he
that's a
stops
win.
talking about you?
Like, oh, he stops talking about me. He stops talking about my son. I mean, at the end of the day, he's going to have the podcast. He's going to have the movies that he's producing. Like, LeBron is very well set up for decades
Yeah.
after he's gone. Not just money-wise, but also just business-wise. People are going to still be talking about LeBron long after he retires. And I'm sure he'll still talk about LeBron in nauseum still after he retires. So I doubt that he's going to stop at any point.
Yeah, the other thing too was like just the fact that it kind of ruined like Stephen A. Smith's image in my mind forever, because he's like going on this weird political tour, and it seems like no matter if it's right, left, center, anytime Stephen A. has someone on his podcast, he's like, yeah, you know more than me, but he like disagrees with them, and he's like arguing like always with us information. And then with this, you're pearl clutching at LeBron James, saying that you'll be nothing after your career and I won't talk about you. Like, LeBron isn't a billionaire and can't figure it out. Like, you'll be nothing without basketball and I won't talk about you. Like, what happened?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that I didn't think about it that way.
That's
yeah,
weird.
he is, especially with LeBron of all people. I feel like if there's anybody in today's NBA that we're still going to talk about after he retires, it's going to be LeBron. Whether we're talking about his impact, the GOAT argument, or just the shit that he does after his NBA career. Just like we talked about Kobe and what he did after his NBA career, LeBron James very much so is in a good position there. And it just, for me, it just, he felt very petty. Like Stephen A. Smith felt like there was like as if there's some extra dirt that he doesn't want to air out about LeBron, some shit that LeBron has under his skin. Like, it just, I don't know. Like, Stephen A. has always been a guy that has been known for his reactions, and I feel like this reaction, he just came off really corny at this point.
Yeah, no, and like he can come off corny at sometimes too, but like it, like this one was just like, it's different when it's entertaining, but when it looks like that personal, and then you're like, I'll never talk about you again, you'll never be in the GOAT conversation after you retire. And it's like, it seemed like this huge moment where kind of the old and new like NBA kind of shifted away from each other. And then the fact that after that he's like, also, I did say that if LeBron put hands on me, I'd swing at him. It's like, LeBron is not going to put hands on you. You're like, what? Stephen A's what, a 60-year-old man? Like, and then he was talking about LeBron making fun of him after that, because LeBron's like, have you seen that boxing video of Stephen A. Smith? Like, it was on Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan was making fun of him. He's like, look, Joe, like, look at this hook. It looks like he's just trying to punch the guy in the dick. Like, what is he doing? And then he ended up breaking his arm because his form was so bad. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to swing on LeBron. Like, what the fuck are we talking about?
Yeah, that was ridiculous. And then also, he had the whole thing about him not attending Dwayne Wade's Hall of Fame ceremony and him not attending Kobe's funeral. I'm like, first of all, what the fuck does that have to do with anything that he said on the Pat McAfee show? Secondly, he attended the Kobe funeral. There's pictures and evidence showing that he did so. And thirdly, like, why does that have, like, does that have anything to do with what you guys are talking about? Like, you're trying to defame his character by simply saying that he didn't attend Kobe Bryant's funeral. I just felt like he was trying to be extra nasty, but he's also just lying at that point and just defaming his character with lies that weren't even true.